Prapitamah
Vashishta, who was known as the great grandfather. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. After saying this, Maharaj Nimi, who was expert in the science of spiritual knowledge, gave up his body. Vashishta, the great grandfather, gave up his body also. But through the semen discharged by Mitra and Varuna, when they saw Urvashi, he was born again. Purport. Mitra and Varuna chanced to meet Urvashi, the most beautiful prostitute of the heavenly kingdom, and they became lusty. Because they were great saints, they tried to control their lust, but they could not do so, and thus they discharged semen. This semen was kept carefully in a water pot, and Vashishta was born from it. Taranam. Vanchakalpa Trubis Charapikas You can probably understand that when I saw this verse and purport, I thought, oh my goodness, to speak on such topic. Anyway, so I thought I would speak on the topic in kind of a general way and talk about different ways people are born. In the Shastra, there's different methods of taking birth. And this is one of them. This is not the only case where somebody was born from a pot. There's actually a couple of other examples that I know of. So the idea was that these saints, this Mitra and Varuna, whether it's the same Varuna as Varuna, who's the god of the water. Anyway, Mitra is the father of Maitreya, I understand. Maybe another Mitra, because there's often multiple persons with the same name. But these two, Prabhupada says they are great saints. So they chanced to meet Urvashi, who's very, very beautiful. They said that the ladies in the heavenly planets are thousands of times more beautiful. But she was beautiful among those ladies. She was beautiful, so she must have been really stunning. So when these personalities, they saw her, they lost control of their bodies. The body responds. My understanding is that the male body responds more to the visual than the female. The men are very visual in that, can be agitated visually more than ladies. So they were agitated by the beauty of her body, and even though they tried to control themselves, they discharged semen. So then it was kept in a pot, and I'm thinking we can't imagine that so easily. I mean, I know they do now, that they have these clinics where they collect semen and they put it in a deep freeze, and if your husband is impotent, you can go there and get inseminated, or if you're lesbian, you can go and get inseminated and have a child that way. That's the modern perversion of all these things. But thinking they must have thought, oh, now this semen has got to be preserved, and must have consulted each other and said, we've got this situation now, we've got this semen, we should conserve it. we should find a pot, we should put it in the pot. And they must have known, it must have been, I think it must have been some arrangement for Krishna for the whole situation to have happened in that kind of coordinated way. It's not, I can't imagine it's something that you normally talk about. You know, these things happen, but you can't talk about them. Anyway, so that's how Vishishta took birth again. And Vishishta is a very elevated personality. So obviously it's not like a negative thing, you know, to take birth from a pot. It's not like a low-class thing, because he's a great personality. In the Bhagavatam, he's also in the Ramayana. So must be a special way of taking birth. You think, well, maybe it's more comfortable being in a water pot than being in a mother's womb. Maybe it's easier to come out also. Yeah? Because coming out of a mother's womb is excruciatingly painful. You know, the babies, when the baby's born, females know these things, but when the baby's born, there's like a part of the skull is not joined. It's like a hole. You know, so when you look at a newborn baby, you can see there's a hole here in the skull. There's just a skin, and you can see the pulse on the skin, you know. Because gradually it grows over and it closes over the brain completely. But the reason it's like that is because the skull gets crushed on the way out. You know, it's like, as you're going out this little tube out into the world, and it's excruciating, painful. Mm-hmm. So if you're living in a pot, my point is anyway, if you're living in a pot, maybe it's easier to come out. You break the pot, or you just pop out the top of the pot, or so there's also a personality called Drona, who was he's said to be an incarnation of Brihaspati. Drona. Brihaspati is the priest of the demigods, and so the personality Drona, but he was the martial teacher of the Pandavas. So the Pandavas, we know the Bhagavad Gita, the main player in the Bhagavad Gita apart from Krishna is Arjuna. So Arjuna had 4 brothers. They also had very unusual births. But talking about Drona was their teacher, was their guru, who trained all the Pandavas to fight, to become like expert Kshatriyas. They were all born Kshatriyas, but you have to be trained. It's not just birth, you have to have the training as well. So they were trained for years by Dronacharya, but Dronacharya was born from a pot. In a similar situation.
And the 100 cousin of...
Yes, but you're spoiling the story. You're telling the story ahead. That's on the list. We're working up to that story.
Okay.
Wait a minute, I just have to find
it. It's under control.
I wanted to find the thing about Drona. So Drona was he was a son of Bharadvaj, right? So Bharadvaj is one of the 7 great sages. And he's mentioned in the Bhagavatam as one of the personalities that came to see Bhishma. And Bhishma was on his deathbed. Bharadvaj was one of the ones who came. Anyway, he gave birth to Drona by passing semen, which was kept in a pot again. I don't know if I've marked it in the Mahabharata. So I just have to go to the Mahabharata. See if I can find that. So again, it's a very, very great personality, taking birth in this very unusual way. No, I haven't marked it. Anyway, the name Drona, it actually means pot. Mm. And he was born from a pot. That's why he's called Pot. So he was called Potacharya. Brahmacharya. So he was very, very powerful, and it was only by conspiracy that he was able to be killed. It was a great conspiracy, and then there's another story in the Mahabharata as to how he could be killed. Okay, so as Bruno is keen to discuss, Duryodhana and his 99 brothers, actually I think there were 100 brothers, because there was one brother from another wife. But anyway, Duryodhana and all his 99 brothers were also born from pots. There were a lot of pots, not just one. There was a whole room full of pots. So this story I can read. It's a good story. It came to pass that Vyasadeva arrived hungry and thirsty at Dhritarashtra's palace. So Dhritarashtra is the father of Duryodhana, and the husband, king, is the king. Blind king, not really the king, but acting as the king, is a husband of Gandhari. So Gandhari is a great princess, and Dhritarashtra is a great member of the royal family. And Vyasadeva, incarnation of Krishna, came to see them. Vyasadeva was pleased. So he arrived hungry and thirsty. Gandhari attended to him conscientiously. Means she was bringing him something to eat, something to drink, taking care, wash his feet, making sure he's comfortable. So Vyasadeva was pleased with the girl and blessed her. You shall have 100 sons, as powerful as your husband. Because Dhritarashtra was super physically, really physically powerful. In due course of time, Gandhari conceived. For 2 years, she bore the embryo within her womb. You wouldn't be allowed to do that nowadays. Once you come to the date and you go over the date, they start the, what do they call that when they start the pregnancy? They start the birth. They give you a chemical to make the artificial something. They start the pregnancy by chemicals anyway. They induce it. That's it. They induce the birth. If you go over a few days, they give you chemicals, and the baby has to come out. Not going to come out. Has to come out on time. So, but anyway, she had 2 years, and the baby still didn't come out. How long was it Vyasadeva was in the womb? 16 years. Shukadeva, Shukadeva, son of Vyasadeva. Shukadeva was in the womb a long time. Imagine being pregnant 16 years. It's hard work when you get fat, this big belly. Okay, so she's been blessed 2 years. And she's becoming more and more anxious that the baby hadn't been born. Then one day news reached her that Kunti, who's another personality in the palace, she's actually the mother of the Pandavas, Kunti Rani. So Gandhari heard that Kunti had given birth, right? She had given birth in the forest to a boy as effulgent as the morning sun. So that must have been Yudhishthira. It was officially her first baby. Of course, we know there's another dimension to that story, but we won't discuss it now. So out of frustration and anger, Gandhari violently struck her womb. She was so frustrated that she'd been pregnant for 2 years, still didn't have the baby. Kunti had the baby, so she was angry with her own body. Then she brought forth a hard mass of flesh that resembled an iron ball. No baby. 2 years, and then there's no baby. There's this little lump, and it's hard, like, iron, like, be hard like that. As the nurses informed her of the stillbirth, she was afflicted by grief and thought of Vyasadeva and his boon. She's like, oh no, this is useless, this is not a baby. Well Vyasadeva promised, he gave me a boon that I would have 100 sons. Now this At once the sage appeared. So Vyasadeva appeared and said to her, "What have you done?" Gandhari told him how she'd become overwhelmed with envy and frustration when she had heard of Kunti giving birth to Yudhisthira. With tears in her eyes, she said, "I struck my womb and this lump of flesh came out. What is the meaning of your boon? You know, like, you blessed me, but look, it's got this lump." Vyasadeva replied with his words. Vyasadeva replied that his words could never prove false because he was so elevated. Yeah, what he said, we know him to be an incarnation of Krishna. Yeah? So what he said has to come true. Satya Sankalpa. Whatever Krishna says, it's true. Becomes true automatically. So he asked the servants to bring 100 pots. They just happened to have 100 pots. So quickly bring them, buy them from the potter. Brought 100 pots, and they were filled with ghee. Each one was filled with ghee. This is the mystic power of ghee, yeah? Okay. So then Vyasadeva sprinkled cool water on the lump of flesh, and gradually it divided into 100 pieces. So he had this lump, like petals in a flower, like gradually 100 pieces. He knew how many pots to bring. That was amazing as well. And each part was the size of a thumb. So that's small for, a fetus. It's quite small, the size of a thumb. And these were placed in the pots, which were sealed and put in a hidden place. So there was one little, I don't know, say it's a fetus in each pot, and they were sealed, covered, and put away. And Vyasadeva instructed that the pots should be opened only after 2 more years had passed, and then he departed to his lonely mountain ashram. Exactly after 2 years had elapsed, the pots were opened one by one. Because in India, in the Vedic culture, they have this very strong thing about who is the elder brother. And then there's a line of authority. You know, the eldest brother is the highest authority, and then all the other brothers have to follow. So the one who's opened first, he would be the eldest brother. So they were aware of this. So from the first came a child who was named Duryodhan. Duryodhan means hard to kill in battle or hard to fight with. Duryodhan. At the moment he was brought out of the pot, the sound of braying asses is like donkeys, yeah, braying. You know, when donkeys go or this noise came when they opened the pot to get him out. And screaming vultures. Imagine the screaming of vultures, not a nice sound. And jackals howled, and the wind blew fiercely. So these are all inauspicious. What we just say in French, mal ou augure? Mauvais augure.
The pots were like this?
No, the pieces of baby. The pieces of baby. Okay. So the pots must have been big enough for the baby to grow at least 5 kilos or something.
They stayed 2 years in the pot.
Sorry?
2 years in the pot.
They 2 years in the pot, yeah. They were 2 years in the womb, and then they were 2 years in the pot.
4. So 4 after Yudhisthira.
Yeah, so maybe they were 4 years old by the time they came out. Maybe they were like Kumaras.
No, obviously.
We don't know. We don't know. You have to be able to visualize these things, you know.
You should make a movie.
There is a movie. There's been several movies, screenplays and different things. All. The whole of India used to stop when the Mahabharata was on. Everything would stop. Really watch the Mahabharata. And the same with the Ramayana, everything. People would be offering puja to Lord Ram on the screen, you know. Anyway, there's a digression. So all these inauspicious things happen. So I won't read anymore because you can read the Mahabharata. The point is that this was a demon. This child was demoniac. and he told the king that he should. He said the sages told him he should kill this child. Of course, he couldn't. His firstborn son and kill him. But he actually, it was predicted that he would destroy the whole dynasty, and he did. So anyway, that was an unusual birth. There's 100 unusual births there. So the other personalities, I just noted it down briefly. Kripa, there's a personality in the Bharat called Kripacharya, and he had his wife called Kripi. And Kripi was the wife of his sister, Kripi, and his sister, twin sister, was wife of Dronacharya, became the wife of Dronacharya. Anyway, they were born from a piece of heath. So again, that was some semen that found in the forest, and these two children were there, and somebody came to the forest and felt sorry the two children were abandoned and took them home. I don't know who it was that took them home and raised the children. Anyway, he became a great personality. The wife of Dronacharya, and this Kripacharya is a very powerful personality. They took birth in this strange way. And then Kartikeya, I don't know the story behind it, maybe somebody knows. Kartikeya was born from a clump of reeds. The semen was left on a clump of reeds. Lord Shiva's son.
Yeah.
Lord Shiva.
Yeah, the wife. Sita.
Sorry?
She makes some clay and she gives birth to the statue of Kartikeya.
Maybe there's different stories. But anyway, Kartikeya
Because
was said to...
away and
Yeah.
there is Pitu, who is born from the...
You've read my notes. You've read my notes.
It's a good one.
Yeah, so there's a dynasty of Maharaj Dhruva. There's a section in the fourth canto all about this personality called Dhruva, who's a 5-year-old boy who goes back to Godhead by meditation. Becomes very, very, very determined to go back to Godhead. His very exemplary determination. And he, anyway, personalities from him. And then one of his descendants was Vena Maharaj, and Vena Maharaj was demoniac. He was a demoniac king. Yeah. He forbade the Brahmins to do their sacrifices, and he forbade them to worship Krishna. And he said, actually, there's no supreme God. I am the supreme. I am the supreme. Because we all think like that, but actually he was going around saying it, and because he was the king, he was forcing it, cancel all this worship of Krishna, and just worship me. So he became so demoniac that the Brahmanas, there was a council of Brahmanas, they all got together and they killed him. They decided, because he was such a bad, even though you need a king, he was such a bad one, that they took him out, they chanted all these mantras, and they assassinated him. For good reasons. It wasn't that they didn't like him, or he wasn't being nice to them, or they were peeved and envious of him. It was that they did it for the sake of Dharma. When you don't have a proper king, it disturbs the whole system is upside down. So I'm just going to read that section of the Bhagavatam. Okay, after making a decision, the saintly persons and sages churned the thighs of the dead body of King Vena. So he was dead, but they were thinking, actually this personality is come in a great lineage, he's come from a great dynasty. So his body is not an ordinary body. They churned the thighs of the dead body of King Venu with great force and according to a specific method. As a result of this churning, a dwarf-like person was born from King Venu's body. So the body is dead, but by some process, some material process. Don't know, it says churning, so you imagine them doing like this with the legs, but we don't know. So then there's this dwarf-like person comes out. A dwarf, small size, adult but small size. This person, born from King Venu's thighs, was named Bahuka, and his complexion was as black as a crow's, with a black skin. All the limbs of his body were very short. His arms and legs were short, and his jaws were large. His nose was flat, and his eyes were reddish, and his hair copper-coloured. So you could see he looked a bit strange. He was very small, very black, with a big mouth, red eyes, a flat nose. You could say, well, he's not exactly beautiful. It's a symptom of being impious or sinful is to have an ugly body. There are certain things that indicate that in the past you have been impious. If you're ugly, if you're very poor, if you have no education, if you're born in a very low family. It's not politically correct to say these things, but this is the actual Vedic teachings, Vedic understanding. Okay, so this personality, this dwarf, came out. He was very submissive and meek, and immediately after his birth he bowed down and inquired, "Sir, what shall I do?" The great sages replied, "Please sit down." So Nishada, the father of the Nishada race, was born. So Nishada means sit down. They just told him to sit down. Because I imagine otherwise they would do some nonsense thing, so they just sit down and don't do anything. After this Nishada's birth, he immediately took charge of all the resultant actions of King Venu's sinful activities. As such, this Nishada class are always engaged in sinful activities like stealing, plundering and hunting. Consequently, they are only allowed to live in the hills and forests. So there's a whole tribe of people who are his descendants, and they all have these sinful occupations like stealing. What does it say? Stealing, plundering and hunting. Yeah? Hunting animals is considered low class, sinful. So anyway, the king had been very sinful, so then all his sins were taken away by this personality, Nishada. And then, it's very surprising. The great sage Maitreya continued, "My dear Vidura, thus the Brahmins and great sage again churned, this time the two arms of King Venu's dead body. And as a result, a male and female couple came out of his arms. So this time a man and a woman came out. Male and female came out of the arms. The great sages were highly learned in Vedic culture. When they saw that the male and female born of the arms of Venu's body, they were very pleased, for they could understand that the couple was an expansion of a plenary portion of Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is like so unusual. There's a very sinful king, and then out of his body comes the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead can appear anywhere, and in any way whatsoever that he likes. We were saying that the other day, that in this age Krishna's come as a mantra. So Krishna can do anything. Appear in any way. There's one form of Krishna, Lord Varaha, and he appears out of the nostril of Lord Brahma. Yeah? Brahma's nose, I don't know if right or left nostril, but this tiny, tiny little form of a pig. Prabhupada uses the word of boar. Come out of his nostrils like this and flying in the sky. Tiny pig flying in the sky comes out of God's nostril. Brahma's nostril, sorry, Brahma's nostril. And that's a form of Krishna, and he grows bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And he has a whole pastime, but it's just an example of a very unusual birth. You can't say Krishna's born, but appearance, very unusual appearance. So all these are different sorts of birth. But for us conditioned souls, living in Kali Yuga especially, but in the material world, the idea is that, or the truth, it's not just an idea, is that birth, death, disease and old age are the four main miseries of life. The four main problems. There are so many different problems. We could, if I asked everybody to write a list of 10 problems, it wouldn't be a difficult thing, you know. Personal problems, general problems, problems in society, problems with New Mayapur, problems with my family, plenty of problems. But the real issue, the real problems are birth, death, disease and old age. Because that's what you get when you live in the material world, and the real problem is that we're in the material world. We're the fish out of water. The fish needs to get back in the water, so similarly we're in the material world, but we need to get back in the spiritual world. We need to go back, spiritual culture. So birth is even though these unusual births were there, we're very unlikely to have such a birth. Even if we take birth again, which is not desirable, it's unlikely we'd born out of a pot or out of churning somebody's body or out of a nostril. Generally people take birth from somebody's womb, and it's said that when the soul is in the womb, he said, oh no, I'm in the womb again, I'm suffering. He said that in the womb is a very uncomfortable situation. He said unless the consciousness is like covered, by Krishna's arrangement, the consciousness is somewhat covered so that you can tolerate, like a tree. Nobody can just stand still no matter what the weather, no matter if you're drying up or, the sun is unbearably hot, or there's people, carving their names and chopping bits off, and, you tolerate all that, but the tree's consciousness is covered so you can tolerate that situation. So in the womb, it's unbearable. You have such a small space, and there's also these worms that also live in the abdomen, and the worms nibble the body. They bite. It's painful. And then the mother eats some chili, and it's like, it's burning your skin because your skin is so delicate. Yeah. And then nowadays, of course, mother's drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, and I saw this picture of this. I think it must have been a little video of this child, when the mother smokes a cigarette, the child is, you can see the child is like cringing because it's unpleasant, So the baby is suffering in the womb. The point is the baby's suffering. And then of course now sometimes they come with a knife or a big vacuum cleaner and they make the abortion, Which is unbearably horrible. I remember I was a child and I first heard about abortion. I thought, wow, do people actually do that? I was just like super horrified to, when you're a child, you live in this nice world, Disney world, and you start hearing the reality of the world, and abortion was like, I just couldn't get it was so difficult to, even still I think, at least I didn't do that simple activity. Anyway, if you did, you have to chant Hare Krishna. So birth is very painful for the mother and the child. The mother suffers. Yeah? That's why it's called labour, because it's such a great endeavour. Get the child out. Nowadays, a lot of ladies, I don't know about other countries, but in the UK you can opt for a cesarean section. You know, where they just cut you open and just take the baby out. Like, there's no labour. So a lot of ladies opt to have a cesarean section because they're fearful of the pain, which seems to be a bit of a chicken if you do that, really. You know. It's also, I think must be the baby. You know, the body is made for the baby to go out that way, and if the baby goes out that way, that's probably what should happen. You know, it must mess up the hormones or something if you have a cesarean. But obviously, sometimes it's necessary. You know, like the baby will die, or the mother will die, or they both will die, or there's some, baby's the wrong way round, or all sorts of problems. So sometimes there is a cesarean section. And one lady died of COVID, but they opened her up and saved the baby. These stories are there. And cesarean is because it refers to Caesar, isn't it? There's one Caesar, one Roman emperor was born by his mother being. So we should try to avoid rebirth, and we should also understand these things. One of the items of knowledge in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, as verses 8 to 12, is Prabhupada translates, but it's there. Krishna tells Arjuna the items of knowledge. There are a whole list of things like tolerance and humility and cleanliness, and can't remember them all because I'm ignorant, but one of the items is understanding or knowing the fact of the miseries of birth, death, disease, and old age. So those of us who are now in older bodies, we know old age is not easy. Yeah? I think for younger people, you look different. You're more or less the same. You just look a bit more wrinkled. But from the inside, being inside an older body, you realise actually it is miserable, because gradually your facility to do things is removed. Yeah? Can't run anymore, and then now it starts to be difficult to get up. So I don't know if I can sit cross-legged on the floor anymore. You need to sit on a chair. It's more difficult to digest things. It's more difficult to see. It's more difficult to hear. And people are more dismissive of you because you're just a silly old fool. And it's like it's all painful. All these things are painful, physically painful. Moving around is more difficult. To go to the bathroom more often, or more difficult to pass stool, whatever. And then physically and mentally, the reality of old age. Jara, it's called Jara. Jara is a personality that nobody wants to marry her. It's a lady who never wants to get married. Sorry, nobody wants to marry her. She can never find a husband. Jara, she's a personality of old age. And disease, we've all had experience of disease. Everybody gets experience. And then the final is the death. So these really are miseries. We can meditate. If you think we have miseries, think, oh, this is very bad. This is such a problem. Or actually, it's not really. Old age and disease and death. So death is very fearful. Very, very fearful thing. We don't like to speak about it. We don't like to be reminded of it. And if somebody dies, you think, oh, well, at least it was them, it wasn't me. And then you think, oh, I'm also on the list. I think you have to meditate on your own death. Prabhupada said, it was very interesting. He said, philosophy means keeping death in your front. It means being mindful of death. And it's the Middle Ages, the sages that keep Brahmins, what do they call it? The monks, they would keep a skull on their table. What's the point of that? That's a bit macabre, but it's because if you look at the skull, you think, that was a living being, he died. That means, oh, okay, I'm also going to die. And if you're going to die, how much can you enjoy? You know, it cuts. You know. So if everybody's in a bar and they're all enjoying and laughing, and you know, men are enjoying the ladies enjoying the men, and it's like, and then somebody drops dead. You know, people don't just carry on. It's like spoils their fun, you know, spoils the enjoyment. I had an uncle, he was an alcoholic, and he died on Christmas Day, you know. Sitting down with his Christmas dinner. In the UK, having this meal on Christmas Day is a big, you know, the big kind of the pinnacle of the year, you know, the big sense of gratification, and you have this big dinner, and he was going, ew. He went face down in his Christmas dinner, you know. It spoilt the fun, didn't it? That spoilt the fun. That spoilt Christmas Day.
At least it was on Christmas.
It was a Christmas, yeah, he went out. Well, maybe it's a good day to die.
Yeah,
but Hare Krishna. I don't know whether he thought about Jesus. He was an alcoholic. He was an atheist and a demon, I suppose.
I had another one.
Go on.
On a special day, on the New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
Not so auspicious, but I was called, a doctor, I was called, you know, midnight,
Okay.
New Year's Eve, you know.
That's the peak time, isn't it? The midnight and the New Year's
big
Eve.
festival, many people, and ding, 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 12 o'clock, everybody under the ghee, this kind of flag. Like that. You just, you know, like that.
Oh yeah, what do you
And
call
a
it?
lady, she was like, you know, 50 something, you know. Oh, New Year, bam, finished.
You just dropped it under the mistletoe.
The whole festival was like.
It's really good for them. Hare
Something
Krishna.
strange was this lady was named, I remember, Harmony Samadhi.
Harmony Samadhi.
Yeah, it's strange.
Harmony Samadhi.
She had a strange destiny. Harmony Samadhi.
Elle avait épousé un samadhi.
Hein?
Elle avait épousé samadhi.
Je sais pas si c'était. Bref. Ouais, c'est méchant.
Anyway, I think the only good thing was that she got a devotee doctor to
Yeah, I
attend her.
chanted Hare Krishna, yeah.
You did, yeah?
Yeah, of course,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And did she actually died? Or she just collapsed? She
Oh,
died?
she died.
She died.
Oh.
So how long did you take to get there? Did you get there with like
Oh,
half an hour?
Yeah,
Or?
5 minutes.
Oh, 5 minutes.
When you
Because
are called for something, you know, just.
you pay. Because it says it takes the soul an hour to actually leave. You know, when you, the last breath or the, you know, the final whatever, when now the person's dead. But, you know, I was told that you should carry on chanting. You know, if you're having a chanting party for the departure of a devotee, you're supposed to carry on chanting loudly for 1 hour. Because the soul can take 1 hour to actually leave the body. You know, it doesn't maybe necessarily leave instantaneously. So if you came and you chanted in her ear within an hour, she could have heard the holy name. I don't know, she may be here with us now, having become she could be, you know.
Anybody in the Samadhi here?
Yeah. Does anybody remember leaving their body like that?
Well, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati left on the 1st of January. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati,
Yeah.
1937.
Yeah.
The new year. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he left his body on the 1st of January 1937. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He left his body also on the new year eve.
Yeah, but it probably was not so important to, you know, a pure devotee, Mahabhagavat, that it was the New Year in the West. It's probably not so important. It was probably more like some auspicious time, you know, or the phase of the moon or some. You know. Anyway, it was when Krishna took him, wasn't it? Krishna. He left early. He said he left 10 years early. You know that?
Oh yeah,
He said he would have stayed longer, but he was disgusted.
He was young.
He was disgusted.
Young, 72.
Yeah.
62, he was young, very young.
He was disgusted with the materialistic mentality of some of his disciples. He
He
was
said,
disgusted.
Yeah. 74.
He would have stayed longer. Obviously, it was some choice there, some decision, you know. She's not
Perhaps he
done.
lived the 1st of January for that. When we make party for this 1st of January, it's for him.
For him,
Instead
it'd
of,
be nice to
for
think,
New
yeah.
Year,
It's nice to think.
we have a-
Remember him. We could have a Bhaktisiddhanta memorial. He actually, yes, we celebrate, isn't it? We must celebrate his disappearance day around that time of the year. It's the same. That would be it.
Yeah.
And the Queen of England, God save the Queen, she left her body on Bhaktivinoda Thakur's appearance day.
Oh,
It was recently. Well, it was appearance or disappearance day. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's appearance day. So that was something for her. Some small lesson for her. She left on a special day, but she wouldn't have known that. She was probably thinking, oh, how will England go on without me? Oh. And then she left. Okay, it's time for... Has anybody got any comment, question? Is that enough for today? Hare Krishna. You want to make...
You forgot one strange verse.
Oh yes, please, there's more. I'm sure there's lots.
Yeah, that's from the Bible. The first woman took birth from the rib.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And Adam was made of dust, wasn't he? God sucked some dust and he blew life into it.
Yeah,
That was also strange.
also.
Some mud.
No, dust.
Mud, yeah, mud, dust and water, mud.
Dust you are.
Yeah, and then he took the rib and made a woman. So, what
You
is
can
the,
see
what is
also
the meaning of that?
You can see that scientists take the flesh of I don't know what and they make another.
Yeah, they do that cloning, don't they? They say, look, we made a sheep, but actually all they did was took some cells that were already in a sheep and grow them.
You know, these stories are not so, the spectacular aspect is not so important for a devotee of God, of Krishna. Because, you know, Krishna is, he can do whatever he wants. And when he appears, it's more extraordinary. He doesn't appear from, a pot or a thing like that. He appears from the pure consciousness. That's the transcendental.
Yeah.
That's these other verses, in scriptures there is always faraway story like that, meant to break our conditionment that things can be only like this. There's nothing above God. So in between, when we are too conditioned by material, temporality,
So-called normality. Yeah.
Then in scriptures you find all kind of things like that, at first and you start to accept maybe there is some higher reality.
Yeah, it's a good point, expand the horizon a bit.
Yeah.
It would make us more open to hearing more and more. Yeah.
Like you said, taking birth from a pot today is common through science, tube, like that.
Yeah.
But you say that 100 years ago,
Yeah.
people say, this is total mythology, flying spaceships and going underwater. This is, but this is material.
It's possible.
It's material things.
Yeah. It's possible by material
And slowly
manipulation.
we come to imagine, to accept that, Krishna's reality, that might be possible.
Yeah.
It seems strange, millions of living of Gopal and Gopis in a little village.
Yeah, millions in one small village.
Maybe it's possible.
Yeah, and all the millions of people, when you read the Krishna book, there were millions and millions and millions of people in Dwarka. how are they all? I mean, it was 96 square miles, it
Yeah.
says, yeah. But they had 16,000, even just 16,000 palaces, all with gardens. It doesn't.
And remark, would it be right to see what is the point of the prop? Is it that to save them the pain of childbirth because they were pious persons and but they cursed each other, so they need to be born again? But because they were pious, they were saved this pain, and that's.
You could say that, but we don't know for sure. You'd have to see a commentary on that point, you know. But that would seem to be a logical conclusion. Yeah. But like Prabhu is saying, you know, that we can just understand these things as just like higher reality. You know, there are aspects of higher reality that we can only hear about. We don't experience, but there are things. There are things that we don't see in our everyday life, but they exist. More elevated society, there are different things going on. Like in the heavenly planets, the demigods, they grow up in one day. You know, the baby's born an adult. No problems, you know, being a kid and all those things you have to go through. Just become an adult. So I think, how is that possible?
Without pregnancy.
Sorry?
Without pregnancy.
Without pregnancy also, there's no pregnancy. You just get pregnant and then immediately the child's born and immediately the child grows up. I wonder how it... Anyway, if we go to the heavenly planets, you'll find out. In the spiritual world, everybody's eternal. There's no question of even any kind of birth or... That's the real point, isn't it? Is to understand the eternal realm. Okay. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Gopaswami Prabhu ki jai. Hare Krishna.